How long does it take to write a book?
It's actually a question I've discussed with a lot of my writer friends. Right? It's someone says they finished a book, and you're like, oh, cool. How long have you been working on it? Like, it almost becomes this casual, like, how are you doing? I'm fine, kind of thing. And I would say on average, people are like, oh, I've been working on it for a year. That's probably my average too. It probably takes me about a year usually to put a book together. But boy, that's not always the case. My most recent Western that I wrote, Navarro's Gold, from like idea to completion, including editing, was 6 weeks, which is definitely an outlier. And I actually think it's a good book. Like, the quality's good. I like it. It's a super fun read. So it's not like time really factors even that much into this kind of thing. And probably the other outlier, definitely the other outlier for me, is Oakville, which I actually started like 22 years ago, which is a long time. Makes you feel old when you kind of pop some of these things open and think about them again. And I guess the best analogy I can come to this is that people who haven't gone through the writing process will probably kind of get this idea is this question: how long does it take to make a friend? Right? So sometimes it happens almost immediately, right? A connection clicks, words flow, and before you know it, there's something really solid there, something real. And then other times, maybe it might take a long time to really truly become friends with somebody, some of those lifelong friendships and relationships. And, maybe they need some patience, or there are little awkward starts, or there's rough patches. And maybe there's even a decade where you don't see each other. But when you get back together, you're like, oh yeah, I remember. Like, we actually had something there. We can continue this. And Oakville was like that to me. It was this like off again, on again. I guess I could say friendship. Friendship's probably not right. It's kind of weird to say you're friends with your book. I guess I am. But it's definitely a relationship. So I don't think either one's better than the other. It's just, different book, different story, different relationships. And I think it's actually a pretty good analogy. It feels good to me. So I think that The Heart of Oakville, which is what I'm going to kind of do this series on, is kind of how I came to this book, and maybe some of the writing process and some of my thoughts that I've had over the years while working on this. And certainly that perspective of writing it over a couple of decades has been interesting to me. And sorry, yeah, there's probably dog noises in the back. My dogs are noisy. So the Heart of Oakville took so long, probably initially because I wasn't ready to write it when it happened. And it's also a common thing you'll hear from people from some of their early books. It's like, yeah, I wasn't ready for that book when I wrote it. So revisiting it has been interesting. But there were two things that were kind of these momentous things that happened at these two periods in my life that kind of kept that book moving or got the book started, I think. And I kind of think of them as kind of like the genesis of my writing career in general, not just Oakville, but like why I started writing. One, like I mentioned, it was 2002, 22 something years ago, and I took a job as to work on Madden football. It was like this honor of my life at the time to become art director on such a storied franchise, and especially one that I loved. Like, I absolutely loved to play the game, and so that was really, really fun for me. And to a point where I was willing to move to Florida by myself for a while until we sold the house. So my poor wife and 4 young kids, and I do mean young at the time, were stuck in Utah while I was in Orlando by myself, starting this new job and trying to meet new people. And which for me is like not fun to begin with, like the meeting new people thing. It was really tough, but I'm sure it was considerably harder on her and my kids. And I remember one time, actually, there's a phone call that I made, and when I called, everyone's laughing and having a great time, giggling around, and come to find out, Annie, my youngest, was taking her first steps. And it was pretty hard. It was pretty hard. It was really hard for me. So, I mean, this was time before FaceTime. So, I felt like I was kind of being cheated of something pretty important. I felt like I'd lost something that I never owned. Or maybe it was something I felt like I had a right to, but because of some of the choices that I made, I missed that opportunity. So it definitely had an influence. But those things don't last forever, and luckily soon we sold the house and my family moved to Florida with me. And before I knew it, we were in the swimming pool and hanging out with Mickey and crew, and just having a nice time. It was a fun time for us. It was a good time for us to kind of like try something super different and super new, and it was fun. And career-wise, it was really good for me because I had a chance to, like I said, work on this awesome franchise. However, that's not really what happened, and I kind of felt like, once again, it was just this kind of weird moment where I thought I knew what I was doing, and all of a sudden everything changed, and I wasn't working on Madden anymore, and I was kind of the same kind of thing. I kind of felt like I lost an opportunity, and it was a real bummer for a little while. But I'd been given a gift, and I just didn't recognize it at the time. And they let me build my own art team and work with a small group of creatives at first that were already there when I started. Just a few of them that were on the team at the time, working on a new project that we were calling NFL Street, which for me, I should have been excited about it, but it took me a minute to warm up to it. And why I should have been excited is because it's like a storied version of a football game, tons of attitude, lots of like culture, and really fun, like, the side of sports that you might not see on TV, and it was really over the top and super arcadey, which, if you know me and like my style, my career, and the games I like to play, it was a perfect match. But I didn't really warm up until I kind of knew the people on the project. And when I started, there was a couple of 3D modelers, Luke Mosling, Johnny Vito Serra, super talented guys, very funny. I mean, like goofy, fun people. And there was a concept artist, a guy named Ed Myers, who had already really set the tone for the product. Like, I mean, he drew a couple of illustrations of some of the players, and they were just so spot on. They were exactly what we needed to capture. And I mean, those became like targets that we shot for the entire project. So anyway, it was great. Got to work with these amazing people. And there were a couple others. There was this kind of wild trombone guy, played in a trombone in a ska band, who was our UI artist, a guy named John Nustel, who we called Nush, and a super quiet animator named Benjamin Yu. And yeah, neither of those two guys are with us anymore. It's interesting. Like, when you have time in these big gaps of 20 years, things shift so much. And so, I think about those two guys a lot. They had a profound impact on me in a short amount of time. And so, this is kind of, I'm getting to this momentous moment, but I wanted you to have this background of like shifting from like what I was comfortable with to something new, and then trying to become comfortable again. It was a really interesting time for me, something I hadn't done before in my entire life. I'd never lived outside of Utah. Well, I had a little bit, but not really. They let me, like I said, let me build my own team, and brought on some new people. And some of the three of the people that I brought on, we kind of had another commonality. We love storytelling, the three of us. A guy named Jeff Spoonhour, who's an incredible animator and video editor, camera guy. A guy named Wes Grandmont, who still to this day might be like the best technical artist I've ever worked with. Absolutely brilliant. Who also went on to write a couple of books, by the way. Look him up, check him out. Wes Grandmont III. And a guy named Billy Harper, who could literally do anything. Like, he could animate, he could model, do concept, he could voice act, he could do anything. So it was really fun. The three of us, the three of them and myself, the four of us, I guess, decided that we wanted to make an animated short. And so we kind of talked about it. We didn't really make a lot of progress on it, but we went out to dinner one night at this strange Swiss, maybe German food place. Sat around the table and told stories about what we could maybe make a trailer of, and I remember some of theirs still today. But I had this weird vision of this one of a box about the size of a walnut being lowered through the clouds on this silver string, kind of like a spider silk, right? And being lowered through these clouds into this little small town. I was probably missing where I grew up at that time, like a little small town in Utah. And this box kind of like very daintily stopped and landed on the porch of two men. There was two of them. Sorry, two boxes, twin boxes. And these men found these boxes and they did completely different things with them. One of them was so excited that he started showing everybody this box and how cool it was. And there was something in it and he couldn't figure out how to open the book, but he wanted people to help him. And the other guy hid the box away from anyone and didn't show it to them. And those singular decisions kind of took people in different directions, took these two men in very different directions. At the time, I was really interested in this one concept. Ideas are interesting. Ideas will get in the way of good writing. So this idea got in the way of good writing for me for a long time, which was the idea of money is the root of all evil isn't really the truth. I actually saw money at that time as like a magnifier, right? So people with great wealth who are good people do good things. People with great wealth that aren't good people will do horrible things. It was kind of the initial idea behind this concept, and even though that really doesn't fit into the theme of Oakville, there's still a kernel of that exists. So the interesting thing is, it sounds like this big momentous brainstorm, but it really wasn't. Like, we had brainstorms like this constantly. You'd pair off in different groups and talk and do fun things, and you get a bunch of creative people together. This happens really frequently. The only reason I think I remember that first momentous moment is that the second momentous moment happened about 2 weeks later, which kind of reminded me of this Oakville story. Well, I at the time, like I said, I was art director on Madden, and there's an art school in Sarasota, Florida called Ringling School of Art and Design. Top notch, one of the best, especially at the time. They are an animation house. They do tons of visual development, which was my thing, is viz dev. It's something I really enjoyed at the time. And so they invited me to come down to talk to their students. And the teacher said, hey, bring whatever you want, but what they really react to is your own personal work, stuff that you've done in the past. So I went down to talk to the students about making a living in the games as artists, and EA gave me a stack of games to kind of take down and to give to the students, which is always fun. Kids love that. The students love that. Who doesn't love a free PlayStation 2 game? So I had this stack of games, and then I'd also brought my portfolio with some of my original paintings and some of my original work with it. And I remember walking out in the parking lot and thinking, when I die, sorry, kind of a morbid thought here, but I thought, when I die, my kids will kind of petition for these paintings. They'll want one or another. They'll kind of argue over them, and they'll be very important to them. And this stack of games that I have here that I've worked on, or friends have worked on, they're not going to really care. They're not going to really care about those games as much. These people that I don't know, the students at the school, are going to have the opposite reaction. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, free game, that's amazing, right? And so that's kind of what I thought. I had this prediction. And when I went in and talked to them, they actually had the same reaction that my kids did. The games were cool and they're awesome. They're fun to have. And of course, who doesn't want a free game? But they were interested in the stuff that came from me. They were interested in the artwork that I brought to kind of show. That was the kind of the second momentous moment. And I've told that story to a lot of people. I've told it to other art kids or to other people. Told it to my family, of course. They kind of know that story. But there's a little bit more to it that I don't normally talk about. Matter of fact, I really haven't talked about that happened after that. So to kind of, I'll make this kind of quick here. We were in a station or a status at the game called pre-alpha, right? Like right before alpha. It's probably the heaviest time in game development. Just ridiculous hours. I remember in a team meeting, a guy named John Shepard. I don't care. I'll name drop him. Stood in front of everybody and he said, hey guys, here's your new hours. 7 days a week. I want you to come in as soon as you wake up, and I want you to stay until you feel like it's still safe for you to drive home. I want you to stay until you're that tired. That's how much dedication I need. I need you guys here all the time. And yeah, it rubbed me wrong, but at the same time, it kind of felt like this rallying cry, like, man, we're doing something huge here. This is so important, that I'm going to give up everything. And while I was driving home from Sarasota to Orlando, I had promised the team I would come back to the game, to work, to continue to work for a few hours before I had nodded off, and I did. I went back, but I was everyone was having fun. They'd just eaten their free food. They were all playing the build for the night and having fun, and it wasn't fun for me. And it's the first time it hadn't been. And I had this kind of like, I don't know, it was tough. And it never really was the same after that. So it was that kind of a big momentous thing. So I went home that night, and I remember pulling into our beautiful house. We had a beautiful house, had a new truck, had all these things that all this hard work was kind of putting together for me. And I pulled into the garage and I parked there. I knew everyone was asleep, and I honestly couldn't remember the last time that I'd seen all 4 of my kids awake at the same time. And it broke me. I was broken. I'm a pretty emotional guy in general. But this one wiped me out. And there's all kinds of other stuff happening. And other analogies, other interesting things that happened in my life back then when I was 32 that happened to me when I was 54 that I'm actually not even ready to talk about yet, about my family. Anyway, it was something had to change. I knew something had to change. And so I committed to myself that I would come home early enough that I could tuck my kids in bed. Even if it meant I had to go back. And I did many times come home and go back. But at that point, we started telling these silly stories about 4 penguins. A penguin named Hoos Foos, a penguin named Ed, a penguin named Freddie, and a penguin named One, like the number 1. They're the dumbest stories ever. Actually, I never thought of something. I wonder if there's a time one of the characters in my Oakville book is named Ed, so I just never put those 2 things together. But every night we would sit, while my kids were in bed, I'd lay on the floor with them, and we'd sit there and tell these just ridiculous stories. It was basically improv comedy, and they were ridiculous. But the interesting thing, to kind of get back to this like stories are relationships thing, is that those 4 penguins lived in our house. My kids drew them. They told their own stories about them. I'd come home and they would just be like, here's what we think should happen next, or wouldn't it be funny if this, right? Like, those characters literally became part of our family for a long time. And it was a massive realization for me. I realized that I'd kind of suffered from this like object permanence stuff, right? I was working on these kind of fleeting games. You make a game every single year, and the next best one is the best one, and you kind of forget about ones of the past. But these silly stories about a penguin were doing the same stuff that my art did. They were building something permanent. And still to this day, my youngest daughter, who, like I said, wasn't even walking when I started that job, she turns 23 in a couple of weeks. If I bring up these silly penguins, they all know exactly what they are, right? Like, we could start telling stories about them today. So I committed myself to doing something, and it was to write. I don't know if I actually started writing Oakville there, but it happened shortly after. And when I did, I had no idea how to write. I knew how to tell stories, at least I thought I did. I knew some pretty good inherent things. I think I'm an inherent storyteller. But I had no idea what I was doing. But it didn't matter. I had a goal. I was going to put something down. I was going to make something that I could leave and share with other people that was part of me. So that's what Oakville is. That's where it started, and to me, that's why that book is important. And I'm really happy. I'm really proud of that book. It's taken me a long time to get it to where it is. It's very different. I don't think it has a real market, other than it's just a damn good story. And if you want to hear more about it, follow along. I'm not going to do anything crazy like a newsletter or anything, but I might kind of spill some of these tales here on YouTube and show you some of the art development that I'm doing for the book also. And, just kind of talk about some of my journey with storytelling using this book, this Heart of Oakville, as kind of my main storyteller here. If you want to know more, stick around. Subscribe, like, whatever those things are. I feel like a total poser saying that. But anyway, I'd love to hear more from you. And if you have any ideas, or questions about it, I'd love to continue the conversation down in the, notes, comments, whatever they are. I'll watch, and if you have questions, I'd love to answer them. Anyway, thanks for listening, and talk to you later. Bye.